It's lights out, everybody, and welcome back to the Low Downforce podcast, the Forefront Formula One podcast. There's only two of us. Yet again, you have the dynamic duo that is Josh and myself, Ben, the pain squad. It was a little bit rough for McLaren. It was a little bit rough for Ferrari. We will certainly get into all of that. But man, are we at the end of the season. We are coming off the Qatar Grand Prix. I almost said the Guitar Grand Prix, which I don't know if I could hit those notes. But
Sounds
it was
like
the
the
last
Hard Rock
sprint.
in Vegas.
That's true. And in Miami, it's around Hard Rock Stadium.
Yeah.
So maybe keep your eye out for the fourth Grand Prix, the Qatar Grand Prix in the United States. But for now, at least, we're talking about the Qatar Grand Prix, the second to last race of the year and the last sprint weekend of the year. So certainly a lot to talk about, as we always do, before we break everything down. Certainly a lot to talk about as it pertains to the Drivers' Championship coming down to the wire. But right off the bat, how we feeling, Josh? What would you rate the Qatar Grand Prix as a weekend as the whole?
I mean, on the whole, the positives were that the championship goes to Abu Dhabi. We get one more week of good racing. The championship is still on. But other than that, like, the racing itself doesn't really do a whole lot for me at Qatar. Like, there's only one place to overtake. It's not usually the most exciting of races. I guess the strategy was, like, theoretically could have been cooler because the tires have such a short life, but realistically it doesn't work like that when everyone just pits at the exact same time, apart from two McLarens.
Well, that's certainly what we're talking about. What would you score it, though, if you were?
Oh, I guess, yeah, I need to score it. I'll give it like a 6 out of 10. Like, it was enjoyable to watch, but like, I'm not going to write home about it.
I am giving it a 3 out of 10. And all three of those points are purely, as you mentioned, the fact that the drama, the Drivers' Championship is continuing to Abu Dhabi, that we got a result that only makes this final race even spicier. Because, like you mentioned, McLaren botched their strategy, didn't pit when everybody else did. But it was almost like the perfect shitstorm of Hülkenberg and Gasly crashing, which led to a Hülkenberg DNF and brought out a safety car on lap 7, was the earliest the drivers could have pitted to do a two-stop because Pirelli had mandated that there were 25 lap maximums for all of their tires because of degradation issues. And so if it wasn't for McLaren, like, do you realize that if McLaren does the right thing and pits there, everybody pits at the exact same lap all 3 times during, or all 2 times during, like, it, in some ways, thank you, McLaren, for having something to pay attention to, because once the pit stops were resolved, everything else was incredibly freaking boring. And as you mentioned, there's only one DRS zone down the straight. The straight's not long enough, even with the headwind. This was Monaco without any historical significance in the middle of the desert. I mean, there's certainly a lot to talk about. Like I said, that's why I'll give it 3 points. But this on screen, as it played out, in some ways might have been the worst race of the year. Very few overtakes, all of them.
I'm trying to think if there's a worse one, but
again,
like, this was not a great one.
Saved
McLaren's
by
stupidity.
Yeah, precisely right. We might as well get into that, Josh. I know you've prepped the race recap, but all of the drama, all of the storylines revolve around maybe the dumbest decision of them all from McLaren, which I will even admit as a McLaren fan that there's been quite a few of those this season.
That is true. But like you said, it was a sprint weekend, so I feel like we should preface it. The sprint was boring as always, but Oscar Piastri got sprint pole. He got the sprint win. So he did go into the race with a lead on Max Verstappen because they were tied for second, I guess, technically, going into this race in the championship. But Piastri had the lead going into the Grand Prix after the sprint. But Max Verstappen quickly took the lead back because he won the race because he's Max Verstappen. He tied Lando and Oscar both, I think, on wins this year, now with 7. So it is really coming down to the wire. Oscar, like we just said, did great this weekend, got second place. Carlos Sainz with a surprise podium at P3. Lando P4, disappointing. Kimi Antonelli P5 with a strong drive. George Russell right behind him in 6th. Fernando Alonso in 7th. Charles Leclerc 8th. Liam Lawson 9th. Yuki Tsunoda in 10th. Oliver Behrman and Nico Hülkenberg both did not classify for this race because Like we said earlier, Nico Hülkenberg crashed out. Ali had his problems. Lance Stroll and Isaac Hadjar also did not finish the race, but they did classify because they finished all but one race. And Hadjar had the puncture at the end. I forget what happened to Lance Stroll. He was kind of irrelevant all race.
Yeah, that I honestly, when I was going through the notes, I was like, I don't remember him retiring. But Josh, you hit on a little. I'm gonna use it as a teaching moment because you're talking about did not finish but still classified. It's either 85%. I believe it's actually 90%. As long as you complete 90% of the laps in the race, you still classify. Which means if there was carnage for whatever reason, we have had. You got to go back to the 80s, but there are episodes of the Monaco Grand Prix where there are fewer finishers than point scorers. So if you do classify, you're still eligible for those points. So I guess there's some significance there, but we don't really see it often really make a big difference.
Yeah, and in like we mentioned, all the pitting earlier, everyone does it at the same time. Because of that, Behrman had a 10-second penalty for an unsafe release. Lance Stroll had
even worse, a 10-second stop-go penalty.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is maybe
so
the harshest of penalties.
So that's we've talked about it before.
Wasn't it essentially served in his retirement also?
Well, no. So he served it before. Yeah, so he served it before. Otherwise, it would turn into a grid drop.
Gotcha.
But it's funny enough. The last time we had a 10-second stop-go penalty was also at the Qatar Grand Prix last year, Lando Norris. But we've talked about before, it's the harshest penalty the FIA can give without disqualifying a driver. You basically pull into the pits as if you were going to change your tires, sit in your pit box for 10 seconds, and then go back out without changing tires. But you've also not just lost those 10 seconds, but also the speed limit in the pit lane also adds a bunch more time to that penalty. So he literally serves it
into
and then
roughly a 30-second penalty.
Effectively,
on the track.
And so he literally serves it. And first off, the unsafe release is because his pit box goes green to leave the pits and they haven't put a tire on yet. So he immediately stops. It's a terrible pit stop. He loses a lot of positions. He serves the penalty later in the race and then immediately comes into the pits after serving to retire. No point in continuing.
And Esteban Ocon also had a false start penalty for 5 seconds. So I think that was all the penalties. Stroll speeding in the pit lane, like I think I said earlier. But yeah, I mean, the race itself, like we've said, it wasn't that exciting apart from Nico Hülkenberg bringing out a safety car and the McLaren's just not pitting.
Yeah, this is, I mean, we'll probably talk more about this later.
Certainly.
It's an obvious flop, but basically, we've heard about papaya rules all season long. McLaren claim they have 2 number 1 drivers. They are trying their hardest to many faults to stick to that. And so in order to not double stack and risk Lando Norris, or this is my belief, is that a double stack would have cost Lando a lot more time than Oscar with everybody coming into the fast lane of the pits, making their own pit stops, that in order to not favor Oscar, they basically kept both drivers out. It would have been better to bring both in as opposed to just bringing one in or the other, but it turns into an absolute shit show from McLaren. But to their credit, they looked quick right after the safety car, enough that there was a little moment of, are they going to pull such a big gap that it's not going to matter? And
they almost did.
Yeah,
the traffic was
really.
The issue.
Not really. In terms of second gaps, they built it up to like 9 seconds, and then Max found his form.
Yeah.
You need about 25 seconds, 26 seconds to actually make that work. So in reality, they weren't that close, but absolute shambles from McLaren. But as you mentioned, it gives us the most important part of this race weekend is that now going into Abu Dhabi, Lando Norris, who finished P4, still holds on to a 12-point lead in the Drivers' Championship, ahead of Max Verstappen, and then 4 points behind Max Verstappen, I believe, on 16 points. No, excuse me, on 18 points is Oscar Piastri behind him. So it's a mess.
Yeah, it is
not handled very well. But for the first time in 15 years since 2010, we will have not 2, but 3 drivers eligible and in competition, still alive for the Drivers' Championship. Of course, the most recent in memory was Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton in the famous / extremely infamous 2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix season finale, where those two drivers were exactly tied on points going into the
That's
final
so
race,
epic.
which meant
That is
because
so
it literally
cool.
means nothing matters except for who crosses the line first.
Yeah. Unless,
Assuming they were in the points.
well, and also if they finish like second and first, at that point you have a fastest lap point. You could tie theoretically if the fastest lap goes to P10 and
and you finish ninth and yeah,
would
but
be
for all
crazy,
intents and
but
purposes, those two drivers were far better than everyone else. We knew it was going to be a 1-2 between the two. We just didn't know who. But it means some interesting things. We'll talk about it more in our preview episode, which is coming up very soon after this episode. To get you ready for the season finale, you absolutely want to tune into that episode because in many ways, this is, depending on how you look at it, either the most important race in F1 since the 2021 finale, or per the other stat I gave, it is the most important race in Formula One since the 2010 finale. So you definitely want to get ready for it. But as it stands, with Lando Norris's lead, assuming Max wins the race, or if he does win the race, he'll take the lead over the season for most wins by a single driver, which is the first tiebreaker, which means Lando Norris would just have to finish in the top 3 to still hold on to the Drivers' Championship. But there's a lot of other permutations if different results come in, stuff like that. So we're not going to be able to break exactly all of them down, but what you need to know is there are 3 very good drivers very much still alive in the Drivers' Championship. And that's like the big takeaway, but we certainly have other track takeaways from Qatar. Josh, I'm going to kick it right back to you. What's your track takeaway from the race, from the sprint, from the weekend as a whole? What's your view?
I think that McLaren, well, not McLaren, but Andrea Stella and Zach Brown would rather a Max Verstappen championship than to pick a number 1 driver, like officially as a team. Because every team knew exactly, hey, this is what lap number, if anything happens, we are pitting because of the tire requirement. So they, unless they're stupid at McLaren, which they're clearly not because they've dominated the Constructors' Championship this year, they should have known we can bring in if not both drivers, just double stack and have a slow stack. But they didn't do that because I think they were scared to make the call for flexibility later in the race, according to
famous last words, right?
Yeah, according to which, if there was a safety car, it would have been like a second safety car. It would have been genius by McLaren. But
that's the thing, right? The whole line of like, we have all the flexibility, but the odds were kind of against you that you were gonna actually benefit from that flexibility.
And they should have known to just bring both in, but they didn't want to seem in favor of Oscar or in favor of Lando by only telling one of them to pit or having the double stack and having Lando stuck behind even longer. So yeah, I think the McLaren team bosses would rather Max win because they've already won the constructors.
In some ways, I'm somewhere between. I'm like a Gatorade lemon lime flag. I'm between a yellow flag and a green flag because I think you're spot on in one sense of this whole game of papaya rules gets rendered useless if at the last moment, at the important moment, you change them and you do favor somebody. And I think that it's weird because they want to favor both, or they don't want to favor either driver. So that famously in Formula One, the 2 number 1 driver combo, think Senna and Prost, think Nico Rosberg and Hamilton. It doesn't end well usually.
No,
it's very rare to retain both of those drivers over multiple seasons in the heat of championships without one of the drivers wanting to leave to be more of the focal point of a team elsewhere. Yeah. On the flip side, I think that specifically Lando Norris winning this championship, and I don't mean that they're favoring him. I think Lando Norris winning this championship actually is the best outcome for McLaren in the long run because this is my take. I think that Oscar Piastri is getting better every year.
Sure.
And I think we are, in many ways, this championship is the data that proves that if Lando wins a championship, finishes ahead of Oscar, Lando is ever so slightly over the course of an entire season better than Oscar. But we're so close to that inflection point that it's very realistic that with another off season, with motivation after the season, that Oscar will be the better of the two drivers.
Yeah.
Like following this year, I think we're very close to that inflection point. And in a weird way, and I hadn't really like put this together until I was thinking about the significance of this, is Lando in Vegas had his 150th Grand Prix start. He also became the first of the only 6 drivers who have achieved that feat with a single team. He was the first to do it at the beginning of his career with the team he started with. So Lando was like, in many ways, the definition of loyalty in Formula One. He also, in Qatar, became, obviously there's more races in these seasons, but he has the most race starts for McLaren in McLaren history, passing David Coulthard. Took David Coulthard 9 seasons because there were fewer races. It took Lando just before the end of his 7th season. But Lando, who joined McLaren when they weren't very good, and he's stayed with them. In some ways, I think if Lando wins this championship, he is okay, or at least more okay with not winning another, especially if Oscar becomes better. Maybe that means he's more willing to play the team game for Oscar in future years, especially if Oscar keeps doing better, Lando will, in some ways, maybe have to help him if there is a championship battle that Oscar's leading. But I also think that if Lando wins this championship, he is going to complete his entire career at McLaren. Because I don't think that... I mean, don't get me wrong.
He'd be happy to be a second driver for Oscar?
If he has his championship, I think his loyalty to McLaren... No, I think his loyalty to McLaren outweighs... But again, I don't think
you get to that point in your career without having that drive to always want the next one. You know what I mean?
Here, I think that's true, right? Once you get 1, you want 2. Once you get 2, you want 3.
Yeah.
Except for Max, who apparently doesn't care, at all whatsoever. Hear me out. I'm not saying like Lando's just going to step aside for Oscar, but like I said, I think we're close to the inflection point. Like Lando literally might be the worst of the 2 McLaren drivers next year, as early as next year.
Sure.
And so
he was this year Lando, at the beginning of the year.
I mean, that's the truth. But over the course of the season, it seems like he still has the edge. But I mean, I know I'm getting long-winded here, but just to wrap it up, like I think that if Lando is clearly the slower of 2 McLaren drivers on track going forward, because Oscar's getting better and better and better, the fact that he has the championship means that he has accomplished everything with McLaren possible. I mean, obviously you can add more championships, but he won the race to give him the constructors last year. He could do the same to win the drivers this year. I think his loyalty to McLaren will, because again, like if McLaren gets a little worse, like where's he going to jump to? Like he's not going to go to Ferrari. I mean, does a place like Red Bull, but like Lando doesn't strike me as like the ruthless killer that Max is, where like he's like whole team on my back, kind of thing. So it's like it's an interesting debate. But to get into my track take, switching gears a little bit, I think that Qatar proved that mandatory pit stops is detrimental to Formula One. We've gotten a lot of rumors and proposals of, maybe in the new regulations, they'll make a mandate that you have to pit stop twice in a race. And what this proved to me, of course, this wasn't a direct mandate. It was kind of an indirect because they said, here's the tire maximum life, 25 laps. You do the math, a 57-lap race, you're going to have to stop at least 2 times. We got this situation where the strategy doesn't get more, variant.
Exciting. Yeah.
It just means that you get more people doing the exact same strategy with 2 extra pit stops. And what it actually means is that conserving tires is less important, which means that strategy is less important because you can push more tires flat out. And if you're pushing flat out and not conserving, there's probably fewer overtake chances. So all in all, this maximum tire mandate, we saw it a couple years ago in Qatar, where they were basically doing quali laps the entire race, and it was also incredibly dangerous. This proved to me that mandating pit stops, 2, 3, 1, whatever. I mean, you're stuck with 1 now, but any more than that, this artificial strategy is worse than what we currently have. I think it would be a huge detriment to the sport.
Yeah, absolutely green flag. And I think they did this in Monaco. Was it this year or last year?
Yep. This year we got the train.
Yeah, and I mean, Monaco, the racing already is bad, but like the racing is bad. I agree, and I think it's exciting to see like Lewis at Silverstone a handful of years ago had a puncture on the last lap and had to like drive home on three wheels to for the win, uh, and it was an incredible lap. And the video and the commentary is awesome. Also, that's a whole tangent I could go on, but I think it's exciting to watch punctures and like the risk of like the tires to some extent have gotten too good, where like there's no danger of puncture usually, and there was one in this race. Obviously, there was a risk of it if you push them too hard because it's so high deg. Uh, but I think that's an exciting ripple or wrinkle to add into the racing that just in terms of like an anything can happen, like having a puncture be a possibility. You could be out in the lead by 20 or 30 seconds and you could still get chased down in the last lap because of a puncture. Like
I would say, I think the thing that like highlights it is I know my predictions. Obviously, it was a little bit of fanboying, but I said Lando was going to lead every session or competitive session. He was going to win both races. He was going to take both poles, that kind of thing. In many ways, though, that was like what I wanted to happen. As soon as I found out about this tire mandate, which was before Vegas, I knew it was going to hurt Lando more than other drivers because there's been discussions, different commentators, is Lando's strength, as he's proven multiple times this year and last year, is end of stint and making tires last a little bit longer than Oscar, who his biggest struggle for the first 2 years was tire management. And so if everybody can push without risk of, any kind of strategy difference where Lando can extend a stint to a one stop where most drivers have to do a two stop because the tires are wearing down, that's going to hurt you. That is a very critical skill of Formula One, where a lot of team principals, commentators say that in the modern Formula One, the hardest thing to get grips with going from F2 to F1 is how sensitive the tires are.
Yeah,
And so
I'm
if you
interested to see
take
what the
away
new
that
tires
management,
next year.
if you take away that management, though, you lose what helps define the strategy. If Lando can pull off a strategy that somebody else can, that's a huge weapon. So, yeah, hopefully we don't see it again. Qatar's got to figure it out because that's the second time in 3 years, and we've gotten some abysmal racing because of it. But I hinted at abysmal. We've talked about McLaren being abysmal. That brings us to our top and flops. And before we call more people abysmal, we are going to shout out a couple of our weekend warriors who really shone despite the slow race, despite the limited strategy. Josh, who was your top this weekend?
The easiest pick of all season, it has to be Carlos Sainz getting the podium. His second podium of the year,
His
right?
second.
He in a Williams, nonetheless, has had a way better year than Lewis Hamilton, who replaced him at Ferrari. And I think Ferrari is probably commercially, they're probably happy that they have Lewis Hamilton and they can market him. But I think team performance wise, Carlos might be a better driver than Lewis Hamilton right now.
Well, I'm going to speak about that in just a second. But I'm going to echo what you had. I went with Williams as a whole. Of course, there's the Carlos P3. That's the highlight of it all. Alex Albon just missed out on the points. But famously, Carlos Sainz, when he signed, he said, don't expect podiums next year. James Vowles, the team principal of Williams, said the same thing. Is he didn't really care about 2025. It was more about putting down stepping stones for the new regulations, 26, 27, 28 especially. So this is his second podium. He kept a McLaren behind him in Lando Norris. Of course, Kimi Antonelli in between the two of them, but even with a little bit of an issue at the end for Carlos Sainz, he's lapping as fast as Lando Norris. Which is impressed. Like anytime you finish ahead of a top team, that's why these midfield podiums are so great. But it's not just a fluke. Like he's driving incredibly well. But I want to shout out Williams as a whole because Carlos Sainz, Alex Albon, equal performers, different time of year. They're almost exactly matched on points. Alex Albon is P8 in the Drivers' Championship. Carlos Sainz jumps all the way up to P9 in the Constructors' Championship. And it secures them P5. So before Abu Dhabi, Williams has finished best of the rest, P5 in the Constructors' Championship 1 year after finishing P9. So James Vowles, Carlos Sainz, Alex Albon, we knew this was going to be a good team. We knew it had potential.
Well, we
but
didn't.
everything we heard was that this potential was going to take years.
Yeah.
And they are well ahead of schedule, similar to what McLaren said winning the constructors last year, that this year was supposed to be McLaren's year. Williams is coming a year, if not 2 years early in being best of the rest, which is awesome to see. One of the historic teams of F1.
Yeah, if this year was just messing around, building the building blocks for next year, they could be a problem next year.
Oh, could you imagine getting the Big Five back? Like having like 5 teams competing for wins week in,
I think
week
it'll
out.
heavily depend on the Mercedes engine because Mercedes, McLaren, and Williams are all.
Which, spoiler alert, rumors are, and these are very loose rumors, nobody really knows anything, but Mercedes is famous for having the best engines and engine regulations. And the rumor is that they are going to be the leader of the new engines and the new regulations. Obviously, we will have to wait and see. But
it is interesting to me also that Williams isn't really a feeder team to Mercedes anymore. Like they have 2 great drivers that are not going anywhere, and they're clearly their own. They're not McLaren's like points level yet, but operationally, I think they're like near that level.
You could certainly make the argument that driver pairing is one of the best in Formula One.
Certainly.
Now, it's so hard to prove, obviously, because the cars are so different and obviously different goals, different ceilings. But Max Verstappen is the best driver on the grid. But you can't tell me that the Red Bull pairing is one of the elite because the second seat
absolutely
is
not.
dog every year.
I'm about to talk about him in a second.
Well, we can certainly get into it. Going to flops, we're talking a lot about the Mercedes engine. I'm unfortunately going to have to flop Ferrari with a little bit of emphasis on Lewis Hamilton. And I mentioned that it would come up a little bit. Let's start with Lewis Hamilton. He is now, after qualifying P18 in the sprint and P17 in the race, does not finish in the points in the Grand Prix or the sprint. So he goes pointless, which means Kimi Antonelli is now 2 points behind him for P6 in the Drivers' Championship, which, okay, Ferrari, shame on them. They got rid of Carlos Sainz for Lewis Hamilton. The guy you got rid of has 2 podiums in a midfield car to Lewis Hamilton's 0, which he had never had less than 3 podiums in a season before this year. And now his maximum is 1. And let's be honest, I don't think it's happening in Abu Dhabi. And then following that up the chain is Mercedes replaced Lewis Hamilton with Kimi Antonelli, who as a rookie could very well, with a points finish ahead of Lewis Hamilton in Abu Dhabi, finish ahead of Lewis Hamilton in his rookie season in the Drivers' Championship, which certainly would be, after already Lewis has called it a nightmare of a season, even more of a nightmare. I might have to double check this to make sure I'm not wrong, but nobody's really talking about it. I'm pretty sure Ferrari is also locked into P4 in the Constructors' Championship. I don't believe
I
there's
guarantee
enough
you
points.
we're not passing.
Well, again,
Red
that's
Bull
dependent on
or Mercedes.
a 1-2 finish and Red Bull DNFing completely in front of them, which we know isn't going to happen, but mathematically, theoretically it could. But I haven't seen any posts about it. I might have to double check my math, but at least when I checked the other day, even with that finish, even if they pulled off a miracle 1-2 finish and Red Bull got nothing, Ferrari is stuck in P4, which they were, speaking of Abu Dhabi last year, they were 16 points off of winning the Constructors' Championship last year, made these huge changes to their car. It didn't pan out, and now we're on the precipice of, if it also doesn't pan out next year, then Ferrari might turn into a garage sale. Get everybody for cheap because they are out the building.
See ya. Well, I teased it earlier too. I'm going Yuki Tsunoda for my flop. He got points. He got points singular. He finished P10, but that's his last point in Formula One. We'll see what he can do in Qatar, but unfortunately, it has been announced that he is out of a job next year, and he'll be replaced by Isaac Hadjar in the second seat at Red Bull. And I feel bad for him because he's not that bad of a driver, but unfortunately, Isaac is being demoted to Red Bull from.
That's certainly how it feels. Who knows with Mecky's in charge now with the new regulations, if there's any hope of the second seat. But I know Yuki's a fan favorite. He's had 5 years in Formula One, a lot more than many, many drivers get. Fought for 4 of them to get into the main seat, got into the main seat, and I wouldn't say wasted his opportunity because there's clear evidence.
Yeah.
There's clear evidence at different points in the season where Red Bull didn't sabotage him, but they did him no favors whatsoever.
Yeah.
But even on his best weekends, it's just nowhere near good enough. One actually thing to tie it all in that I didn't mention with Ferrari being a flop is Max Verstappen. He has so many of Red Bull's points, all but 20 something, that he now has more points than all of Ferrari combined. So that's a little bit of a slap to Yuki. That's a little bit of a slap to Ferrari, but it is a shame. He is going to stay on as their test and reserve driver, so he won't be too far.
I guess he's not out of a job. He's out of
the sport. But as I said earlier, it is soon over. Unfortunately, he's got one more race unless Haas and Alpine decide to do something really stupid and like Alpine kicks Esteban Ocon out one race before the end of the season because he's on his way out, which I don't think Red Bull will do. I think they'll give Yuki his flowers at least, but it seems to be the end of the Japanese driver Honda experiment at Red Bull, unfortunately for Yuki Tsunoda, and unfortunately for some of us, the Predictors Championship is coming down to its final race, and oh boy, did I not do so hot.
Yeah, well, I did do kind of hot because I said Piastri was going to have a great weekend, and it started off great for him. He got the sprint win, he got the sprint pole, both predicted by me, and he got the race pole. And then I also predicted P1 and P2, Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri. So I finished with 5 points, just straight up sniping positions on the grid. Matt finished with 3 points for his hot take of fastest pit stop of the year. Despite McLaren's blunders on strategy, they did have the fastest pit stop of the year. They had a 1.8, I believe, which might tie the record.
It up right
maybe
now.
A 1.79.
I'm pulling it up right now as we speak. So apologize
but you and J9
for the typing in the background. But I've seen rumors that, like you hinted at, it broke McLaren's previous world record. And it's not just the fastest of the season, which got Matt his hot take, but it is the fastest pit stop ever in Formula 1.
Which I think the fastest prior to that was also in Qatar. So something about fast tires, I believe. I guess. I don't know. But anyways, you and J9 both neither got any points. So I'm in the lead with 54, Matt 49, J9 36, and you're still right behind with 35. But not very many points left to be predicted.
No.
Because there's only 5 more predictions plus a hot take.
I also can't. Okay, so this is actually going to get really interesting. You might have to weigh in here, Joshua. According to DHL's website, who is in charge of the fastest pit stop award, I don't know if there was a timing error, but it says that the fastest pit stop of the 2025 Qatar Grand Prix was Oscar Piastri with a 2.08 second pit stop.
Oh,
I don't know
that
if the timing was wrong, but
that has updated.
That means that it is not the world record, and it is not the fastest pit stop of the season. So, Matt, I know you're not here. If you're listening, I'm so sorry that you have to find out this way. But
oh no,
I don't know what.
I thought they did it, but during the race they announced it as a 1.8. Like,
well, the time. Sometimes when I see the timing numbers, I have no way to prove it. But sometimes I'm like, that seems like the number didn't match up. It seemed like a fast pit stop, but
well, I hate to
right
see
now.
that.
I'm kind of
That
lost
is
for
unfortunate.
words, but I'm trying to find out why this doesn't count.
Well, oh well, you know. I guess we're erasing Matt's points, and does that declare me champion? I'm up 8 points with 8 points to go.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I'm not seeing anything other than I'm stuck on this now because I'm a numbers nerd. But according to DHL Motorsports, who is in charge of the fastest pit stop, it is not a 1.8 second.
Hate to see that.
2.08, which was still the fastest of the race. So kudos to McLaren there. But
okay, well that means I'm the only one that got any points this race.
Wait, so how many
I have an 8-point lead, and with the 5 predictions plus hot take we make, Matt would have to sweep, and I would have to get 0 for us to tie for the lead.
Ooh, what's our tiebreaker going to be?
We don't have that. So
I'm going to say it's most hot takes gotten correct over the season, because that's the hardest one to pull off.
Certainly,
We're going to executive order that right now. But Josh is hoping and praying that,
I mean, I feel like Lando
nobody's
Norris
pulled
right
off
now.
a perfect weekend ever in either 2 years of doing this. So Matt would have a first if he were able to do that. And simultaneously, Josh getting 0 points would also be shocking for the man who's been leading the championship the whole time. But similar to F1 on track, our Predictors Championship technically goes on to the final race of the season. You won't want to miss it. Not only is it the last race of the season, it is the last race of the regulation. We are saying goodbye to the DRS button. So if you like seeing overtakes, I mean, hopefully, supposedly, there will still be plenty of overtakes in Formula One. No, I'm not saying they're going away, but DRS, as we know it, drag reduction system to help with overtakes, is going away. And then, of course, on top of it all, the cherry on top of the cake, on top of the icing, is that we have 3 drivers still competing for the Drivers' Championship in 2025. The first time in 15 years that statement is true. You won't want to miss it. You will absolutely have to tune in to the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix coming up this weekend. But first, be sure to check out our preview episode. It is the last of the season, as we mentioned. There is so much to talk about because there's so much on the line. But until then, everybody, stay speedy. Goodbye.